I never thought moving off campus would feel like this. At first, it was supposed to be a relief, escaping the chaos of dorm life, the endless noise of people partying 2 doors down, and the shared bathrooms that always smelled like bleach and mildew. When I found a listing for a small 2-bedroom rental house, just a 15-minute walk from campus, it felt like a miracle. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was quiet, and best of all, I only had to share it with one housemate. His name was Daniel. He was a grad student, a couple of years older than me, studying architecture. The landlord told me he was quiet, reliable, and keeps to himself. And that part was true. He wasn't loud or obnoxious. But from the very first week, something about him unsettled me. Daniel wasn't normal quiet. He was a kind of quiet that made a room feel heavier. He'd often sit in the living room at night with no lights on, just staring at the wall, like he was thinking about something that nobody else should ever hear. He rarely ate with me, even when I cooked extra. And he locked his bedroom door religiously, even if he was just stepping outside for 5 minutes. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone has quirks. I told myself he was probably stressed with school, but then the house itself started to feel strange. It was old, at least 70 years, with uneven wooden floors and creaking pipes. The kind of house where you'd expect to find a secret history, maybe even a ghost story or two. At night, I'd hear faint knocking sounds coming from inside the walls. Not the kind of noise old plumbing makes. No, this was rhythmic, like someone tapping deliberately. And sometimes, when Daniel wasn't home, I'd hear footsteps upstairs. His room was directly above mine, so the sound of pacing was hard to ignore. I'd creep up to check, only to find his room locked tight, the house empty. There were other things too, small things that gnawed at me. My phone charger would vanish from the kitchen counter and reappear in the laundry room. A framed photo of me and my sister fell off my nightstand in the middle of the night, the glass shattering on the floor. Once, when I was half asleep, I could have sworn I heard someone whisper my name from the hallway. I never said anything to Daniel. What would I even say? Hey, does our house have ghosts? Or worse, hey, are you sneaking into my room at night? No, I stayed quiet. But the real story, the part I'm only admitting now, months later, began the night I found the door. It was a Tuesday. I came home late from the library, rain dripping off my jacket, the house unusually silent. Daniel's car was in the driveway. Inside, the air smelled musty like damp wood. I remember kicking off my shoes and hearing the faintest scraping noise upstairs. Not footsteps this time, more like with dragging against wood. I froze at the bottom of the staircase, listening. The sound stopped. After a long pause, I forced myself to laugh it off and headed up, telling myself it was the wind shifting the old house's frame. But when I passed by Daniel's room, something caught my eye. His door, normally locked, was cracked open. I don't know what possessed me, but I pushed it open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight, the air stale. Daniel's space was surprisingly bare, just a bed, a desk covered with papers, and a single lamp. No posters, no bookshelves, nothing personal. It felt less like someone's bedroom, and more like a temporary hiding place. I was about to back out when I noticed something odd. In the corner, behind the sliding closet door, a faint line marked the floor. A groove like a hidden seam. My curiosity overpowered my nerves, and I pulled the closet door aside. Inside, instead of clothes, there were boxes stacked against the wall. I crouched down, pushing one aside, and that's when I saw it. A door, small, wooden, about 3 feet tall. Almost like it was meant for a crawl space. There was no handle, just a recessed gap where you could pull it open. The wood looked old, darker than the rest of the closet. I tried to avoid Daniel for the next couple of days. It wasn't easy. We lived on the same roof. But something about being around him after seeing that little hidden door made my skin crawl. Every time I heard him moving upstairs, I couldn't help picturing that closet, that small wooden door pressed into the corner, waiting for someone to open it. But avoiding him didn't last long. On Friday night, I was sitting in the kitchen eating leftover noodles when Daniel walked in. He barely acknowledged me, just poured himself a glass of water. I studied him carefully, wondering if he knew I'd gone into his room. Long week? I asked, my voice too casual. He looked at me for a long second before nodding. Yeah, you? Yeah, I said. Then silence. He didn't eat, didn't linger, just stood there in the dim kitchen light, sipping his water with this faraway look in his eyes. I noticed then his nails were dirty, the beds of his fingers caked with soil, like he'd been digging in the yard. When he left the room, I realized I'd been holding my breath. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening. At 2 a.m., I heard him again, his footsteps pacing above me. Then the dragging sound, wood against wood. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone for light and crept upstairs. Daniel's room door was closed again, locked, but this time I didn't hesitate. I pressed my ear against the wood. For a while, there was only silence. Then, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it, I heard a muffled thud from inside the closet. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering in my ears. The next morning, Daniel was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway. I told myself it was my chance. I shouldn't have done it. I know that now, but curiosity overpowered fear. I went into his room. It smelled faintly of damp earth, like wet leaves rotting. The boxes were still stacked in the closet corner. My hands trembled as I shoved them aside. The little door was still there. I crouched down, gripping the edge. My phone's flashlight beam wavered over the wood. "Don't do this," I whispered to myself. "Just don't." But I pulled anyway. The door groaned, resisting at first before scraping open with a screech that made every hair on my body stand on end. A wave of air rushed out, stale, cold, almost metallic. My light caught on stone walls and wooden beams. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a tunnel, narrow, sloping downward into darkness. My throat tightened. I wanted to slam the door shut, pretend I hadn't seen it, but something pulled me forward. Maybe adrenaline, maybe stupidity. I crouched and crawled through, my phone light trembling in my hand. The tunnel smelled old, like mildew and iron. The wooden beams above my head creaked as I moved. Cobwebs brushed my face. After maybe 15 feet, the ground leveled out into a small chamber, and that's when I saw them. Objects, dozens of them, arranged carefully along the dirt floor and against the walls. A child's shoe muddy and torn, a broken wristwatch, its glass cracked, old photographs curled at the edges, faces scratched out, glass jars filled with murky liquid, something floating inside them that I didn't want to recognize. I froze, my breath shallow. The air was heavier here, suffocating. On the far wall, someone had carved marks into the stone, lines grouped in fives, tally marks. There were hundreds of them. I felt sick. The worst part? It wasn't abandoned. Dust hadn't settled on the objects. The footprints in the dirt were fresh. I turned to crawl back when I heard something. A whisper. It was so faint I thought it was my mind playing tricks. But then it came again. A soft, guttural sound, like words being forced through dry lips. I spun, shining my light deeper into the tunnel. The beam landed on something pale in the shadows. A face. Not Daniel's. Not anyone I recognized. Just a face, ashen skin stretched tight over bone, eyes wide and glassy, watching me from the darkness. I scrambled backward, hitting my head on the low seal.
I avoided Daniel all weekend. I couldn't look at him without hearing that whisper in my head, without picturing that pale face staring at me from the tunnel. I told myself I dreamed it, that maybe I'd panicked in the dark and imagined what I wanted least to see. But the objects, the shoe, the jars, the tally marks, they were too vivid to dismiss. By Monday, my nerves were frayed. I jumped at every sound, every creak of the floorboards. At class, I couldn't focus. I kept scanning the room, paranoid that someone was staring at me. When I got home that evening, Daniel was in the living room, sitting in the dark again. No TV, no music, just sitting there, his hands clasped, staring at the floor. I forced a smile. "Hey!" He looked up slowly, his eyes catching the dim light. For a moment, I thought I saw dirt under his nails again. You went in my room. The words hit me like a knife.